We will be rereading George Webb's book, Why No Autopsies? How China Got the V. This is how I will be going along, so in hopes YouTube doesn't take it down. Fauci and Redfield's experiment gone awry. Screw you, AI. Starting with a $25 million DARPA bioweapons grant in 2013, tiny biotech Moderna had little chance for getting FDA approval for its synthetic mRNA. But two men, Fauci and Redfield, were old pros getting it tested on US soldiers and approved through the system. When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man. Anthony Burgess, Clockwork Orange. Journalist George Webb, who predicted Task Force Orange at Fort Belvoir would launch a bioweapons attack in the U.S. called a Clockwork Orange, 9 parts yellow fear, 1 part red blood. Prologue. Fair warning, I have been called a conspiracy theorist by CNN and 60 Minutes for saying deadly pathogens are made in deadly pathogen labs. I have also been called a conspiracy theorist for both these news outlets because I have said military organizations like NATO start wars and carry out wars. I am the poster boy of an attack on the First Amendment in the United States by Senator Elizabeth Warren called Section 230. I, George Webb, network analyst turned citizen journalist, had no desire to produce the most informative and provocative videos and books regarding Corona V that took China by storm in March of 2020 that were suppressed in Western media. This is my Corona V story. Chapter 1 has a Wikipedia article snippet, serial passage. Serial passage refers to the process of growing bacteria or a V on iterations. For instance, a V may be grown in one environment, and then part of that V can be removed and put into a new environment. This process is repeated with as many stages as desired, and then the final product is studied, often in comparison with the original V. This sort of facilitated transmission is often conducted in laboratory setting because it is interesting to observe how the V or bacterium that is being passed evolves over the course of an experiment. In particular, serial passage can be quite useful in experiments that seek to change the virulence of the V or other pathogen. One consequence of this is that serial passage is useful in creating Vs, since scientists can apply serial passage and create a strain of virus that has low virulence. You guys are going to have to follow on because I can't say the banned words 2 Vs. Figure it out. Deadly pathogens come from labs that make deadly pathogens. Vs are like house guests. They don't want to kill their hosts. A V lives off their host for the energy of replication. The common cold is a Corona V strain. Yes, it infects. Yes, it mutates from year to year if Vs are employed against it. But it rarely kills. Vs that kill are the equivalent of house guests that kill their host. There is no reason to do this. The relationship is symbiotic between V and host. No natural force can make a V a deadly pathogen. The truth is that deadly Vs are created in laboratories, military laboratories. These labs take animals that have died by disease, grind them up and inject them in other animals to make them sick and make them die. And these military labs repeat this process with the injected animals that die. If they inject another round of animals, and this process can be repeated at any number of times to make a deadly V. That's the truth. It's called serial passaging. If you can also reverse the process by culling for animals that live and create a V. That's why the military labs that do this serial passage to create these bioweapons are also in the best position to deliver the Vs. It's a little confusing, but try to follow along. Later, you will learn about a scientist that passaged Corona V 10 times from bats to humans. His name was Ron Fauci, and his lab is called the Erasmus Lab in Rotterdam, Netherlands. I wrote a book about the lab called Spray It in Dutch and NATO's Little Shop of V's. Surprise! No, I haven't read that one yet. That's why. You can be assured that book writing is equivalent to taking a vow of lifelong poverty, and my previous career of network engineering is orders of magnitude more profitable than writing. My only motivation is for the Corona V madness to stop, and it won't stop unless we understand who is creating these Vs. Here's a article snippet. Might SARS-CoV-2 have arisen via serial passage through an animal host or cell culture? While I don't have a medical degree, I can also assure you this book is based on scientific facts. I quote scientific studies, not my personal theories. Here is but one scientific study that calls into question that our current SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus occurred naturally. This short book is going to tell you the truth about coronavirus. This is how the story of coronavirus got to China. Chapter 2. Gain of function means it kills better. Deadly military labs hide behind phrases like gain of function. Imagine the worst plague-ridden animal that is about to die. Now imagine chloroforming the animal and performing an autopsy on the animal to find the organs with the most infective cells. Now grind those organs up into a paste and separate the blood carrying the disease. Now start injecting other animals that are closer and closer to humans. This is serial passaging that you learned about in the last chapter. Now we will add gain of function. After the passing the pathogen through the animals with similar lungs to humans, we splice out the deadly genes we have isolated and put them into another mild virus like the common cold or coronavirus. Voila, we have created a deadly pathogenic V that can now fly through the air to infect far more people. This is a gain of function in the V because now the V can spread in the air like seeds from a dandelion. As you can see, the condemnation did not just come from scientific journals. Other researchers from around the world were nearly unanimous. This gain-of-function GOF research was a very bad idea. Only military laboratories are interested in making deadly pathogens airborne. The research has no other justifications, and yet that is exactly what the Erasmus Lab has been doing with coronavirus and the close relative SARS and MERS. SARS is severe acute respiratory syndrome and MERS is Middle East respiratory syndrome since the inception in 2003. We are not picking on Ron Fauci of the Erasmus Lab. The Erasmus Lab is really the one trying to make deadly flus airborne. The scientific community shut down gain-of-function research for 4 years from 2015 to 2019. It was an incredibly bad idea to restart gain-of-function research. My strategy to stop really bad ideas that can be used to create nuclear winters of our economies and lives, it is to expose really bad ideas and name the individuals who are promoting these really bad ideas. Kawakoa of the University of Wisconsin and Ron Fauci of Erasmus University in the Netherlands, both leading H5N1 researchers, argued the fears were overblown and surpassed by potential public health preparedness their studies may lead to. Yes, we need to create the problem to learn how to fight against it. Yeah. Here's University of Minnesota SIDRAP. Commentary: The Case Against Gain-of-Function Experiments, a reply to Fauci and Kawakoa. Editor's note: Today's commentary was submitted by Sid Rat by the authors. They respond to critiques of their recent journal articles, which they argued that there are safer and better ways to investigate influenza V transmissibility, prevention, and control than to conduct experiments that lead to creation of more contagious viruses. Yeah, no shit. There's a 60 Minutes article, I believe. Why victims of internet lies want Section 230 repealed. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996 protects internet platforms from liability for what users post on their sites. Yeah, only if they act as a publisher, not as an editor. They've been acting as editors, so Section 230 doesn't apply to them, meaning we don't need to repeal it, we just need to enforce it. Good heavens. Science and Security, the moratorium of H5N1 gain-of-function experiments. March 7, 2013, Christina, England. The highly pathogenic avian influenza HPAI H5N1V poses a public health threat in many regions of the world. Approximately 600 human cases have been reported since 2003, with a laboratory-confirmed case fatality of up to 60% according to the World Health Organization, WHO. The recent death of a woman from southwest China attributed to H5N1 has sparked concerns with public health officials that the strain can now be transmitted between humans. Typically, H5N1 is contracted by people in direct contact with poultry. CNN and 60 Minutes would have you believe I am making up the fact this manufactured gain-of-function virus could be used to create a nuclear winter of the world's economy just so I can sell books. I could say the same about NATO's desire to topple governments and sell emergency vaccines. I have pennies to gain for every book I sell. The Erasmus Lab and NATO have trillions to gain for every vaccine they sell. To demonize the journalists who write stories about the Erasmus Lab and NATO's for-profit motive of these, the 60 Minutes personalized the NATO VV story by not reporting that China's foreign ministry had accused the U.S. Army athletes of bringing the COVID-19 V to Wuhan. Instead, 60 Minutes recast my reporting as an attack on a Dutch Armed Diplomatic Security Service Army reservist who had worked for Supreme Allied Commander, NATO commander. It's interesting to note that some of the same reports accusing George Webb of falsely reporting the Chinese Foreign Ministry has accused the U.S. Army contingent of bringing COVID-19 V to Wuhan, where the same reporters accusing President Donald Trump of working with the government of Russia to create disinformation in political campaigns. We will find out more about how SARS-CoV-2 got to China in the next chapter. If you want to look up these articles, you can, I suppose. Chapter 3. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says the U.S. Army contingent brought COVID-19 to Wuhan. On March 5th, 2020, Zhao Lijiang, the Foreign Ministry spokesman for China, was asked to apologize for the coronavirus coming from China. On March 11th, he saw CDC Director Robert Redfeild testifying about a mystery pneumonia that brought out in U.S. military forts in Washington, D.C. In August 2019, Redfeild testified that the CDC had not done any autopsies of those who had died from the mystery illness. Li Jiang exploded on Twitter asking why the U.S. Army athletes coming to Wuhan from the D.C. area in October 2019 had not been tested. Li Jiang asked why American athletes had not been tested and why this information was not shared with China. MSM, or mainstream media, immediately labeled Li Jiang's dozen tweets as the topic as conspiracy theory that U.S. athletes brought COVID-19 V to China. I had been researching and reporting biological weapons programs at Fort Detrick in Maryland and Fort Belvoir in Virginia with my research partner, a woman ex-cop named Jenny Moore from Tracy, California. We had interviewed numerous participants in Dr. Fauci and Robert Redfield's experimental vaccination programs at the two Army forts. Jenny Moore died in a low-rent motel. We were both staying in the outskirts of DC in the August of 2018 under circumstances still not fully explained. But when a White House reporter informed me about Redfield Li Jiang's story in March 2020, I immediately suspected experimental vaccine experiments that Redfield had conducted with U.S. Army soldiers with help of NATO biosurveillance programs. Excuse me. Both Jenny Moore and I had interviewed doctors as well as vaccine recipients. Oh shit, I fucked up. Damn. At Bethesda Naval Hospital and Fort Belvoir Community Hospital. We both had been informed that unethical experiments were going on in both locations, possibly testing without informed consent with both soldiers and patients at Veterans Administration hospitals located in the Washington, D.C. area and in West Virginia, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio, Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, and Mississippi. As soon as I saw Redfield was covering up the mysterious pneumonia deaths at the U.S. Army forts, I immediately suspected that Li Jiang was right. NATO had been used as a testing partner since President Richard Nixon's ban on the development of biological weapons in 1969. The key NATO location in the U.S. for bringing biosurveillance personnel from NATO in Europe was the Allied Commander Transformation located in Norfolk, Virginia, ACT. The Allied Command Transformation, ACT, is a warfare development command which frequently includes the development of biological weapons from the Erasmus Lab, including gain-of-function experiments. Seed funding was being provided to the Erasmus Lab research partner, the University of Wisconsin, for biological warfare projects, and the lion's share of funding was being provided through NATO to avoid the U.S. ban on development of biological weapons. I was very familiar with the U.S. State Department granting diplomatic cover for those NATO personnel involved in the development of these bioweapons, so my antennae was tuned for any NATO diplomatic folks working in the Fort Detrick or Fort Belvoir area near Washington, D.C. before Li Jiang Redfield Twitter explosion about U.S. Army bringing COVID-19 to Wuhan. Remember, Redfield at the CDC had not bothered to research COVID-19-like deaths. The sort of deaths you would have if you tested the Erasmus Labs SARS and MERS variants on U.S. soldiers at Fort Detrick and Fort Belvoir in August of 2019. The only possible reason for this mind-boggling negligence in mind was to ascribe a dark motive to Redfield. Redfield knew the deaths resulting from his illegal testing with Fauci, and the Chinese foreign minister spokesman Li Jiang was calling him out. CDC director says some coronavirus-related deaths have been found posthumously. During the Oversight Committee discussion on the novel coronavirus response, the director of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control Prevention and some deaths from coronavirus have been discovered posthumously. Rep. Harley Rauda asked CDC Director Robert Redfield if it's possible that some flu patients may have been misdiagnosed and actually had coronavirus. The standard practice is the first thing you do to test for influenza, so if they had influenza, they would be positive, Redfield said. Rauda then asked Redfield if they are doing posthumanous testing. Redfield said there has been a surveillance system of deaths for pneumonia that the CDC has. It's not in every city, every state, every hospital. I was currently hosting a citizen journal journalism symposium near Washington, D.C. on the Potomac River when a White House producer from a Japanese television told me about this story. We immediately refocused on the symposium of citizen journalism on finding the NATO State Department folks in the U.S. contingent to the Wuhan Games. I have been criticized in the mainstream media for immediately going after the NATO component or the NATO contingent to deflect blame from the U.S. athletes, soldiers, going to NATO Wuhan Games in October of 2019. I had been a college basketball athlete and a semi-professional basketball player in Europe, and I was well aware of athletic teams being used for cover for diplomatic hanky-panky. At the first whiff of a Redfeild Fauci cover-up from Li Jiang, I did indeed bore into the telltale NATO contingent, or continent. Really, a NATO U.S. State Department contingent embedded inside the U.S. military athletes going to Wuhan in October of 2019. Literally within minutes of starting to look for the NATO embedded contingent within the U.S. military athletes going to Wuhan, we found a 52-year-old Dutch armed diplomatic security services for the U.S. State Department who had worked for the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, Mathieu Benassi. Armed diplomatic security service personnel were also always the telltale signs of people protection, the diplomatic corps of these missions to foreign countries. As we workshopped the NATO embedded contingent names on a whiteboard that we were live streaming, we reported these initial findings rhetorically, as if we found Leo Li Jiang's Patient Zero embedded in the American team. In retrospect, I regret live streaming the event, which gave me no chance to mask the armed diplomatic security services person's name. When our group quickly found the 52-year-old Dutch woman's husband also worked for the State Department at the Pentagon as a liaison for NATO, we reported that too. Again, I regret not pre-recording the event and masking his name. I regret, yes, but here it is. But remember, both my investigative partner Jenny Moore and I have done our homework on Fauci and Redfeild with their experimental V's. We had authors come to our previous Citizen Journalist Symposium to testify to the group about that fact. We knew Fauci and Redfeild were covering up the COVID deaths at Fort Detrick and Fort Belvoir in August of September 2019, before the athletes left for Wuhan. We found out one of the NATO State Department contingents with the U.S. military athlete worked at Fort Belvoir Community Hospital. Perhaps out on an innate desire to see the truth come out, I wrote the name on the whiteboard. I had no idea that the video would be retweeted and viewed in China over 655,000 times in the next 4 hours before it was removed by YouTube. Shortly thereafter, my YouTube channel of 105,000 subscribers was taken down, destroying 4 years and 4,000 on-site video reports with a 60-second warning. I wrote several best-selling books on Amazon that were quickly banned, again charging me with harassing the armed diplomatic security services personnel who worked for the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. I smile wryly when I consider the absurdity of this harassment. If I would publish with the naming the armed diplomatic security personnel services name, the mainstream media would accuse me of making up the story. With the name, I would be accused by both CNN and 60 Minutes of harassment. In a future book, I will outline in detail the U.S. Air Force's Project Baseless, which has concerned itself with spraying biological weapons from low-altitude drones since the 1950s, developing and testing viruses and V's at U.S. Army locations. For now, I owe it to you, the reader, to tell you what the group who brought the COVID-19 V to China, Fauci and Redfield, and they used military athletes to do it. Chapter 4. Were the Fort Detrick murders a cover-up of Fauci and Redfield's illegal testing on soldiers? Navy medic who shot 2 was assigned to Fort Detrick Medical Research Center. The Navy corpsman involved in shooting 2 at a cancer research facility near Fort Detrick was later shot on the Fort Detrick base. Yes, get rid of your evidence. When I see a non-violent Ethiopian turned into an active shooter, and he is tied to the part of the country torn by terrorism and 3 recent cholera outbreaks, my interest is piqued. My first reaction is, I hope the shooter wasn't using bioweapons to tilt the battle in favor of his side. If the shooter is tied to the defense minister of Ethiopia with the same uncommon last name, I get a little more concerned. If the current director of the World Health Organization is also from that same war-torn part of Ethiopia and has been charged with using bioweapons against opposing tribes in Ethiopia, I am then looking into the story. Dr. Fantun, F-A-N-T-A-H-U-N, Woldensbet, W-O-L-D-E-S-E-N-B-E-T, worked with bioreactors/fermenters that can amplify bioweapons. Ethiopia's military chief calls WHO head Tedros a criminal supporting a rebel region. Ethiopia's top military man says WHO Director Tedros committed war crimes using biological agents in a rebel region of the country. WHO Director Tedros is the target of genocide charges from many in American academia, and you have to cover that story if you are a responsible, objective reporter, literally the head of the agency looking into whether or not a bioweapon was deployed to initiate the coronavirus pandemic, is being accused of being a war criminal using bioweapons on his own people. Tedros T-E-D-R-O-S-A-D-H-A-N-O-M. Tedros Adhanom. WHO chief may face genocide charges. Here's our snake in the grass. WHO Tedros may face genocide charges for the use of bioweapons in his home country of Ethiopia. So when a mild-mannered Ethiopian PhD in bioweapons research at Fort Detrick turns into an active shooter, my instincts are to follow the smoke. There may be fire. Tedros being the first political appointee to being the World Health Organization director is also troubling, and the fact he holds no medical degree is equally troubling. WHO Tedros Adhanom is expected to be tried for crimes against humanity. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, G-H-E-B-R-E-Y-E-S-U-S. If you can say it, you're a better man than I. In addition to being the first director of the WHO without a medical degree, also has a political background compared to his predecessors on his online biography. WHO exalts his qualifications as Ethiopian health minister from 2002 to 2012. Impressive stuff. Tedros is the third highest ranking member of a tigray of terrorist organizations in Ethiopia. Investigative reporters are supposed to ask questions. Did the Department of Defense or NATO appoint this guy to be a bioweapons proxy to test their new concoctions around the world? That's a valid question given the evidence on Tedros. That's also a valid question. Gangsters kill witnesses. It is not out of the realm of possibility that bioweapons war criminals would want to cover up the worldwide outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. WHO director is accused of backing a tigray TIGRAY rebel group against Ethiopian Defense Forces. My detractors like CNN and 60 Minutes will immediately accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist, but at this point I am only asking valid questions. The more familiar with my work will I say I lived in a heavily Ethiopian neighborhood near Washington, D.C. for a year and a half, and they will cite an endless stream of Uber and Lyft driver refugees I have interviewed from Ethiopia as confirmation bias. Again, I have yet to present any of that information. There's a Reuters article. Update for Ethiopia accuses WHO Chief Tedros of backing Tigray rebels. Ethiopia's military accused World Health Organization Chief Tedros, guy's impossible name I can't pronounce, on Thursday of supporting and trying to procure arms and diplomatic backing for Tigray state-dominant political party, which is fighting federal forces. He himself is a member of that group, and he is a criminal. Army Chief of Staff General Birhanhu Jula said in a televised statement before calling him to be removed. Major media outlets all over the world have reported that Ethiopian generals have accused World Health Organization Director Tedros of backing Tigray rebels. We have a mild-mannered PhD working at the bioweapons lab of the U.S. Army in medical research who is related to the top general in Ethiopian Defense Forces who turns into an active shooter a few days ago. That's potentially news, and that's when investigative reporters get cracking. There's no confirmation bias here at all. WHO Chief Tedros Ghebreyesus is accused of aiding genocide in Ethiopia. Nobel Peace Prize nominee lodges complaint with International Criminal Court. An international complaint has been lodged with the criminal court in the Hague over the World Organization Director Tedros' war crimes. The world is suffering from a nuclear winter of Corona V lockdown. The world deserves an investigation of these charges and these unusual incidents in the United States' top biological research facility. And if you want to look up some of these articles, you can do it for yourself. I'm not going to read them all. That gets me banned. Chapter 5. Follow the evidence to bioweapons research at Fort Detrick. If you want to trace the Ethiopian roots of the Fort Detrick shooter to the current World Health Organization director, you have to look at how the U.S. Navy conducts its bioweapons research overseas and study how WHO Director Tedros made his meteoric rise to the top of the WHO without a medical degree, a historical first. There's a To understand who prompted Tedros in Africa, you have to know a little about U.S. Navy biological weapons programs in Africa. If you support the U.S. Navy's development and testing of biological weapons in Africa, you are going to rise more quickly in the ranks than if you are an outspoken critic. So here goes with little background info on the Navy Corpsman Fort Detrick shooter in Africa and how Tedros is connected to the Navy's infectious disease program in Africa that rocketed Tedros to power. Okay, Navy Medical Research and Development, NAMRU. Navy cuts ribbon on biodefense laboratory at Fort Detrick. In the spirit of interagency collaboration and promoting synergy in science and research excellence, Navy, Army, and other federal agency representatives and guests gathered at Fort Detrick in Frederick, Maryland, May 2nd for the inauguration of the new Navy Research Laboratory on the base. The new home of the Navy Medical Research Center, NMRC, Biological Defense Research Directorate, BDRD, is building 8,436,600 square foot facility. Prior to cutting the ribbon, Navy Captain Richard L. Harberberger Jr., NMRC commanding officer, expressed his pride, saying, "Welcome aboard. It's been an adventure from the BRAC base realignment and closure to bricks and split up polish. The building is amazing and science conducted inside it outstanding, and the people who work here are incredible. BDRD has 6 primary research: immunodiagnostics, molecular diagnostics, V and countermeasure research, genomic research, international field microbiology projects, and mobile laboratory response in support of military operations. The new lab reflects that Navy medicine is a partner. That's where it's cut off. U.S. Navy opened a new biodefense lab at Fort Detrick in 2012, where the Fort Detrick shooter worked. Here we are. If the Fort Detrick shooter worked at the Navy Medical Research Center, NMRC, it is important to understand what field stations are called in Navy parlance. A Navy Medical Research Unit, a NAMRU, is a field station for the Navy Medical Research Center at Fort Detrick. There was a NAMRU in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, called NAMRU 5 before it was kicked out of the country for being suspected of biological weapons. Testing of biological weapons, excuse me. Here, Navy Research Medical Unit 6 in Peru researches infectious disease. U.S. Navy NAMRU have been accused of field testing biological weapons developed at Fort Detrick. Navy Research and Medical Unit Number 5 was kicked out of Ethiopia with only 4 days' notice in 1977. Tedros was associated with the provisional military government that was installed after the Ethiopian Civil War. I have had the opportunity to interview a dozen veterans and refugees from this war from the neighborhood I lived in Washington, D.C. NAMRU 5 was kicked out of Ethiopia in 1977 for suspected biological weapons testing. Just read that. If you trace the source of NAMRU 5's short 3 years and inauspicious years in Ethiopia to its roots, you will see it is an offshoot of NAMRU 3, then based in Cairo, Egypt. If you do a few Google searches, you will see that the Egyptians believe that NAMRU 3 has been using the Egyptian people as lab rats for 60 years. The outbreak of secure acute respiratory syndrome and Middle East respiratory syndrome have been traced back to NAMRU 3 for the Arab Spring revolts, infecting camels because camels were immune to those respiratory syndromes. And what great vector. It doesn't affect the camels, and you just slap the camel's ass and tell it to go into that village, and boom, there you go. The Egyptian Daily believes that the U.S. Navy NAMRU 3 had used them as lab rats for 60 years. The Egyptian Daily promotes anti-U.S. medical conspiracy. A U.S. Navy medical research team has been manipulating the Egyptians' DNA and poisoning its citizens for 60 years, according to a translation of an article published Friday in the Egyptian Daily Al-Waft. The verbal barrage against U.S. Navy Medical Research Unit 3, NAMRU 3, was identified by Middle East Media Research Institute, MEMRI, and is part of a growing Egyptian backlash against the American government. The newspaper is published by Egypt's Al-Waft Party, considered an influential liberal group. The Navy's NAMRU 3 is the Department of Defense's largest overseas facility. In my work, I have focused on this facility for biological weapons claims, with particular attention being paid to a field station at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti, for its role in sub-Saharan African biological weapons testing. NAMRU 3 supports health protection in the Horn of Africa. Oh, of course it does, Mr. Peter Stroke. Camp Lemonnier, established in Djibouti in 2002, is the only fixed U.S. base under the Africa Command, AFRICOM, and is also home to the U.S. Combined Joint Task Force Horn of Africa, CJTF-HOA. Originally focused on counterterrorism operations, the camp's mission has now expanded to include strengthening partnerships and contributing to stability in East Africa. Stability. In my previous books, I have charged this medical unit from AFRICOM as being responsible for biological weapons testing in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Sudan, and Yemen for the Arab Spring uprisings, and I have written and reported on biological weapons in the Congo, Rwanda, and other sub-Saharan African countries. I can say from my previous reporting, the U.S. Navy has long looked for a proxy to get biological weapons monkey off their back. To put in direct terms, I believe WHO Director Tedros was their man in Ethiopia in 2003 when he became Deputy Health Minister of Ethiopia with no background in medicine, solely as a political appointee. Tedros became Minister of Health the next year under suspicious circumstances. Now you know a lot more about the U.S. Navy biological weapons programs in Africa. WHO Director Tedros' close association with the programs and the Navy corpsmen working in those programs at Fort Detrick. Now you have a background that will dive into on the specifics. There's our snake in the grass. Chapter 6. Woldenspet, a Woldenspet. My kingdom for a Woldenspet. Okay, you say, show me how the Fort Detrick shooter, the mild-mannered PhD scientist, maps to the Ethiopian Ministry of Defense. After all, if Woldenspet, a mild-mannered PhD, is not connected to the Ministry of Defense, there's hardly a chance he is a spy trying to collect dirt on Tedros. Well, here is your Woldenspet, the State Minister of the Defense of Ethiopia. Woldenspet, pictured in blue shirt, the State Minister of Defense for Ethiopia. You might say that's a coincidence in names. 2 F. Woldenspets, 1 F. Woldenspet, the Fort Detrick mild-mannered professor working in the Navy medical lab, working in a bioweapons lab, and the other F. Woldenspet, the Chief Minister of Ethiopia, accusing Tedros of being a biological warfare war criminal. But does it deserve more It deserves more digging, right? Well, if F. Woldenspet the F. Woldenspet in with the Ethiopian Ministry of Defense is the key African Union member overseeing the military presence in the Horn of Africa, which includes oversight of the current UN mission in Somalia. This oversight responsibility includes the key U.S. Navy Namru 3 extension at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. Full disclosure, I have received several death threats from the ex-U.S. Navy Intel and Weapons Officer for this Horn of Africa region, who also worked for this U.S. State Department, which oversees these weapons programs. It's not Adam Schmidt. What's that guy's name? I can't think of his name at the moment. U.S. remote U.S. base at core of secret operations. U.S. base camp at Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti has been the key drone testing area for spraying biological weapons. Look up the article for yourselves. Interestingly, the U.S. Navy weapons officer death threats to me include secret experimental locations for U.S. Navy programs. Ex-State Department liaison Kenneth Hale threatened to Waco my family, Waco, Texas, Jonestown my family, again a biological testing experimental cohort in the jungles of Guyana. Apparently Navy officer Hale had seen the spread of dead bodies from biological and chemical warfare before, including them in 2 separate death threats. Here's the same article I just showed you before. This is the 3rd of 3 articles. Djibouti City, Djibouti. Around the clock, about 16 times a day, drones take off or land at U.S. military bases here, the combat hub for the Obama administration counterterrorism wars in the Horn of Africa and the Middle East. Some of the unarmed aircraft are bound for Somalia, the collapsed state whose border lies just 10 miles to the southeast. Most of the armed drones, however, veer north across the Gulf of Aden to Yemen, another unstable country where they are being used in an increasingly deadly war with Al Qaeda. Operation Justified Accord overseas, the U.S. mission in Somalia, Fizia Woldenspet is directly responsible for Geneva Convention warfare violations of drone biological weapon spraying in Somalia. That part wasn't part of the article. This is part of the book. The United States currently has no embassy in Somalia, but there is a U.S. diplomatic mission. Warring factions in Somalia have divided Somalia, making it a ripe country for natural resource plundering. The U.S. mission to Somalia is a peacekeeping mission overseen by the African Union directors like Fauci Woldenspet. Fauci Woldenspet is the top African Union leader oversees the U.S. peace mission in Somalia. There's our snake in the grass again. Dr. Fatahun Woldenspet may have been upset bioreactors. Dr. Woldenspet may have been upset bioreactors were moved from Ethiopia to Kenya for the U.S. amplification of bioweapons. Here's a tweet. U.S. Army's Southern European Task Force. From my left, State Minister of the Ethiopian Ministry of Defense, Fauci Woldenspet, U.S. Ambassador of Ethiopia, Michael Raynor. Okay, that's just another tweet proving that is Mr. Woldenspet. Fauci Woldenspet is a key African Union official overseeing Justified Accord 2019, Chapter 7. Why isn't the fox investigating the wolf who ate the chickens instead of... Oh, no, crap. Why isn't the fox investigating the wolf who ate the chickens in the chicken coop? You don't ask the fox to investigate who ate all the chickens in the chicken coop. If all the chickens go missing, you organize a fox hunt. Many wonder how WHO Director Tedros can so openly threaten a sitting president of the United States with body bags if he didn't have the U.S. military joint chiefs behind him. WHO chief to Trump, there'll be more body bags if you politicize coronavirus crisis. I don't know if I should even put that. Where's my... There was a big security breach at the U.S. Army fort in Maryland in August of 2019 that you probably haven't heard of. The U.S. Army fort is called Fort Detrick, and they store bioagents like pandemic flu, coronavirus, there that cause worldwide flu pandemics. If the world is suffering a worldwide flu pandemic, that's where you'll start looking. One thing that is for sure, Tedros had access to the bioweapons from the Horn of Africa U.S. mission to Somalia. If you want to chase drone spraying attacks, you have to follow the people who have access to drones and biological weapons. All signs point to the Horn of Africa to lose bios. Peter Strzok's territory. Fort Detrick lab shuts down after failed safe inspection. All research halted indefinitely. Tedros also seems to have foreknowledge of upcoming attacks in April of 2021. Coronavirus pandemic is a long way from over, says WHO Chief Director Adhanom Ghebreyesus. WHO seems to have foreknowledge of upcoming events in the attack of April of 2021. CDC inspector findings reveal more about Fort Detrick research suspension. U.S. Army Fort Detrick was closed in August of 2019 due to a serious security leak. Now, any responsible investigator would look at a worldwide outbreak beginning at the same time as a safety leak. I had been investigating the Fort Detrick lab for years, along with the nearby Bethesda Naval Hospital and the Walter Reed Army Medical Hospital, as a reporter in the Washington, D.C. area. I first looked at the discontinuation of the federal agent program at the same time as the August 2019 leak. This program tracks the biological agents getting checked in and out of the lab. If you are missing cash out of your bank vault, you first pull up the logs of people that are going in and out of the vault. You don't discontinue your program of tracking people who go in and out of the vault. Fort Detrick discontinued its federal select agent tracking program during the critical security leak in August of 2019. Right here. Fort Detrick has been ordered to discontinue the development of offensive biological weapons in the late 1969 by Richard Nixon, and many critics have charged the human research and development movement to the nearby National Cancer Research Institute and animal testing was simply moved to the U.S. Department of Agriculture with their APHIS testing program. The CDC sent a cease and desist order in July. USAMRIID received the order from the CDC. Its registration with the Federal Select Agent Program, which oversees disease-causing material use and possession, was suspended. The suspension effectively halted all biological select agents and toxin research at USAMRIID, van der Linden said in her email. Federal Select Agent Program does not comment on whether programs such as USAMRIID is registered and cannot comment on action taken to enforce regulations. Catherine Harbin, a spokeswoman for the CDC, wrote in an email, "As situations warrant, Federal Select Agent Program will take whatever appropriate action is necessary to resolve any departures from regulatory compliance in order to help ensure the safety and security of work with select agents and toxins," Harbin said in her email. The suspension was due to multiple causes, including failure to follow local procedures and a lack of periodic recertification training for workers in the biocontainment laboratories. According to van der Linden, the wastewater decontamination system also failed to meet standards set by the Federal Select Agent Program, van der Linden said in a follow-up email. Federal Select Agent programs was discontinued when the Fort Detrick safety breach was discovered. I was already chasing the story about a spy ring in Congress exfiltrating bioweapon secrets to the country of Pakistan as a proxy to resell these weapons all over the world, with the most likely customer with lots of ready cash being China. May of 2017, George Webb went to Ames, Iowa to research Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel's connection to bioweapons testing on animals at the APHIS. Webb connects Rahm Emanuel's connection to a Pakistan volume production facility for bioweapons. APHIS is Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services. George Webb researched the USDA's APHIS testing labs in Ames, Iowa, for the proxying of bioweapons secrets to Pakistan. Again, as an investigator, you look to telltale signs in your investigation. Are the bank employees open and honest about their trips in and out of the bank vault? Or are they secretive and deceptive about their whereabouts when questioned about the investigation? The response of the U.S. government with regard to the breach and information sharing with the Chinese government has certainly been the latter. U.S. government has not cooperated with the Chinese government with regards to evaluating the lab release of the coronavirus pandemic flu bioagent. The Global Times from Canada has led the way in the news coverage of this story, and I urge the reader to Google these headlines for a more in-depth information. Just from the headlines, you can see a pattern and the practice of lack of transparency with regard to the coronavirus outbreak. There's a Global Times article, "Scientists unable to judge if U.S. lab is a V source due to the lack of government response." Another Global Times article. FMU urges U.S. to tell truth over Fort Detrick refuting Wuhan biolab conspiracy theory. The Foreign Ministry of China has repeatedly asked the U.S. government for more transparency regarding the Fort Detrick security leak of August 2019, which the Chinese government believes could have led to the coronavirus worldwide pandemic. Now, people started ending up dead in your theoretical bank vault investigation, and your nefarious purposes sniff test would start sensing something rotten in Denmark. And that's exactly what just happened in the April of 2020 at Fort Detrick. Questions remain about exactly what is happening at Fort Detrick and what they are doing through their proxies around the world. Our investigative team will continue to research this developing story. Many wonder how WHO Director Tedros could so openly threaten President Trump with biodisaster. And that's it.